Hi guys, welcome back to the home and Homestead. My name is Rebecca, and today on the Homestead we'll be doing part 7 of a multi-part series of Hearty Soups and Rustic breads. In particular, we will be making beef bone broth, or beef stock. So we typically get a half of a cow, and with that you can order different cuts of beef and things like that, and one of the options is to take the soup bone, and I like to take that. And that's what we'll be using today to make the beef bone broth or the beef stock. So earlier today, I roasted or browned the beef in the oven, and I placed the soup bones. I took out 2 from the freezer. It's about between 5 to 6 pounds of soup bone here. And I placed them on a baking sheet and put them in the oven at 425 degrees for about 30 minutes. And that gave them a nice browned color, and that just will give your beef bone broth or your beef stock a much richer flavor. I also took the scraps from the freezer that I had from canning projects and cooking projects. You will see in my balsamic onion jam and sweet onion jam, I took the onion scraps, and other times I made soups and things like that, maybe the celery scraps you can see in there. So I basically have onions and celery in there at this point in time. So I will be using those today as well. That will not be wasted. Well, what you see here is what we will be using to make the beef bone broth or the beef stock. I'll be using my 18 quart Nesco Roaster Oven, and this is a fat separator that will work nice later to help separate the fat away from the broth so that it can be canned. And I'll be using some onions, some carrots, and whole garlic cloves. I'll go over the amounts for each once we get this recipe going, but I wanted to show some of the equipment that we will be using today for this project. Alright, so let's get this beef bone broth started. So into my 18 quart Nesco roaster, I'll be putting some beef soup bones in. These have been pre-roasted, they have nice color to them, and we won't waste out those nice juices. We'll put that in there too. So for the size batch we're making today, I would go between 5 to 6 pounds of a beef soup bone, which is what we have today. To that I will add our vegetable scraps that we've been saving from various canning and cooking projects. That'll add some nice flavor to our broth. To that I will add about 1 pound of onion, which ends up being about 4 to 5 small onions. And about 1 pound of carrots. I just cut the carrots in half. I don't peel them or anything. I just make sure they're nice and clean. That ends up being 4 to 5 carrots. And then I add 6 whole garlic cloves. Next, I like to add my salt and pepper. So I'll start with 2 tablespoons of salt. If you don't want to add your salt and pepper to your bone broth, you certainly don't have to. You can wait until you're cooking. But I think that adding the salt now also helps add a little more moisture to your broth because it draws fluid out of the onions, and it's slightly seasoned then as well. Then I like to add 1 tablespoon of whole black peppercorns. And finally, 2 bay leaves. Now we're going to add the water. So that all depends on the cooking reservoir that you're using. If you're using a big roaster oven like this, you'll get a nice amount of beef bone broth in the end. You can also make smaller batches in a Dutch oven on the stovetop, or by using the 6 quart Nesco Roaster Oven. If I'm doing the 6 quart roaster oven, I might just do 1 beef soup bone and then vegetable scraps and carrots and onions and things like that. But whatever you're cooking that in, you just want to fill it with water so that all of the ingredients are covered and submerged, but still leaving room for these ingredients to give off their moisture as they cook. So now we'll cover this, and I like to start at 250 degrees and bring the stock up to a real light simmer. And I like to cook mine for about 24 hours you can between 16 to 48 hours, depending on how rich and concentrated you want the flavors of your beef bone broth or beef stock to be. So we'll start with 250 degrees and we'll bring it up to a real light simmer, and then we'll let this cook for a good 24 hours. Alright guys, so it's been a little over 24 hours and the beef bone broth or beef stock is finished. So we'll take the lid off here. And I'll turn the Nesco Roaster Oven off. So what's nice about this beef bone broth and the beef stock here that we've made is that you can make this in a range of time. So from 16 to 48 hours, so you could start it perhaps at night before you go to bed and then come back the next day after work and put it away. Or you could start it maybe Friday evening and sometime over the weekend put it away. By put it away, I mean this can be put into a jar and put in the refrigerator. That'll last about a week or so. This also can be frozen. You can put it in a freezer safe container or Ziploc bag. If you're planning to put this in the refrigerator or freezer, this will need to completely cool before it is put in the refrigerator or freezer. Or it can be canned, and I will be canning this. There's a much longer shelf life if you can this. When I do that process, I will use a fat separator. And you put the beef stock through here, there's a little strainer on top, and then the bottom, eventually the fat will rise and the bottom will be the broth, and you press this little button and then the broth comes down and it separates the fat from that. Well, I hope you enjoyed our time together in the kitchen while we made this beef bone broth or beef stock recipe together while we slow cooked it in a Nesco roaster oven. Again, this can be refrigerated, frozen, or pressure canned. So watch for step 2 while we pressure can this recipe that we did together today. Well, if you're new to the channel, I would appreciate you subscribing. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. See you next time. Take care.